Damn. Go.
Alright guys, how's it going? It's the EastBayAnglers, and today we're going to talk about something different. We're going to talk about the Kastmaster. We're going to talk specifically about changes and modifications that you can make to your Kastmaster to ultimately catch you more fish. There are days when you struggle, there are days when the bite is tough, there are days when these fish are overpressured by the same baits, and sometimes just changing that bait up a little bit makes the difference and helps you catch more fish. So let's talk about some of those modifications and some of those changes to your Kastmaster that you can make, whether you're freshwater or saltwater fishing, that make all the difference. Alright guys, first of all, we want to talk about gels and scents and attractants, and we want to talk about applying those to Kastmaster. Alright guys, so remember, when these fish swim up to get the bait, they do miss it occasionally, and there are times when they come up and they swipe, but they don't really give it their all. And sometimes having that attractant, that gel or that scent applied to that lure, that Kastmaster, makes all the difference, guys. So just remember, some of our favorites are Smelly Jelly, and we like the Special Mix, and we also like the Crawdaddy. Alright guys, so just remember, when you're out there fishing a Kastmaster, if you're not using gels, scents, or attractants, then you're missing out. You're missing out on those fish that almost went for it, and they literally came up to the point where they could almost taste the attractant or the gel or the scent, and they'll go back and they'll hit that bait that they wouldn't hit originally. So sometimes having this on makes all the difference. Alright guys, so just remember, when you're out there and you're fishing Kastmasters, remember you got to have some attractants, some gels, some scents applied to your Kastmaster. It's going to make all the difference. Alright guys, so we're going to move on. We've talked about applying gels, scents, and attractants to your lures as you're fishing them. And one of the other things you need to remember is when you're fishing with gels, they tend to hold on that lure longer, so you can fish for that lure for 10, 20, 30 minutes before you have to apply more attractant or gel. But when you start using the oil, that seems to come off the lure a lot faster. You guys are going to have to apply the oil every 10 to 15 casts, so it's going to be more tedious. So gels are generally better than oils in my opinion when you guys are applying your different scents and attractants onto the Kastmaster. Just keep that in mind, guys. Alright guys, so let's go ahead and move on. We're going to go ahead and talk about the second thing that is really important when you're modifying your Kastmasters, and that's changing out hooks. And one of the reasons that changing out hooks is so important is because sometimes, you know, you get a small Kastmaster like this and you want to fish it right over the weed line, and you can't because this treble right here gets in the way. Alright guys, so one of the things I also like to do, my second favorite thing to do with the Kastmaster to modify it, would have to be changing out the hooks, guys. Play with these split rings. You know, for example, we've got this Kastmaster here with this standard treble, and you know, I can go ahead and put some of these single hooks on there and have a lot less snag ups if I'm fishing over the top of weeds or things that have a tendency to snag up and make me lose my lure. So you're usually fishing these Kastmasters on lighter line, and that line eventually gets nicks and little wears, and it wears down in different areas over time. So we lose a lot of Kastmasters we lose a lot of these particular lures. So sometimes changing out, putting that single hook makes all the difference, because you're going to want sometimes to put bigger treble hooks on these Kastmasters. Sometimes you're going to want to put smaller treble hooks. For example, here's a 1-ounce Kastmaster I'm pointing to, and I've actually come to the point where I've replaced it with a treble that was smaller right here than the one that actually came stock. And the reason I replaced it and put a smaller treble is because these bigger Kastmasters actually put off more flash, and being able to put off more flash fishing from the bank, and if you know your bank well, you know the shoreline well, and you know where the snags are, you can go ahead and fish one of the bigger sizes of the Kastmaster. All right guys, so we're talking about sizes, and when you're fishing different sizes of Kastmasters, each size has a time and a place. So the smaller ones are really good for rivers and streams, creeks, things like that, the 1/8, the 1/4 ounce. And once you upsize to the 3/8 and the 1/2 ounce, those are good for bigger bodies of water. And obviously those even bigger Kastmasters are usually, for the most part, I hear about people talk about throwing them out in salt water and catching, yourself, all kinds of different fish. All right guys, another thing that's really important is taking a standard hook and adding some feathers to it. So right here we've got these 3 right here that have feathers, and those really put off an entirely different look. It's an entirely different profile in the water. It entices a lot of fish that normally would not be willing to strike. All right guys, so an alternative to spending all that money on those individual feathered hooks is going ahead and get yourself some artificial feathers, or go ahead and get yourself some real feathers if you want. They sell a lot of the times for fly fishing. And you go ahead and get some thread, get some ultra wire, some thin wire. Go ahead and just twist that on there, tie that on there, and you've got yourself a feathered hook. It might not last as long as the ones that are tied on that you buy pre-tied, but they're still extremely strong. Alright guys, so the next thing we're going to talk about is modifying your Kastmaster's look. We're going to talk about customizing the paint job of your Kastmaster. So sometimes you're going to alter it really little. You're just going to put a couple circles with a Sharpie. Do really simple modifications, customizing as far as the paint job goes and as far as the look goes. But sometimes you're going to want to go all out. You're going to want to try some things and go really all out and kind of get a little bit overboard with it. Now, some of the times I really like to go overboard with the paint job is when I find Kastmasters laying around on the banks, the shorelines of lakes after the waters come down, or just sometimes in random occasions. But you find them, and sometimes they're rusted out quite a bit, or sometimes they got a little bit of rust, or they're definitely worn, and you got to change out everything. You're going to find these on the shorelines, these Kastmasters that are all worn out, and what you're going to want to do is you're going to want to go home and get yourself a spray can of some cheap enamel or some high-end enamel paint, and you're going to want to, whatever you prefer, and you're going to spray that on there for a base coat, and then after that you're going to sand it all down, and then you're going to go ahead and you're going to throw that coat on there one more time. And at this moment you can pretty much do what you want to that lure. As far as your final paint job, you can put your final color and then add some detail to it, or whatever you want to do. And these lures are going to look pretty much like these do right here. These are 2 that were absolutely destroyed, that I've modified by just taking some TLC 10 or 11 care, putting it into the paint job, putting it into all the rust, sanding them down, putting the base coat, putting the final coat, putting the lacquers on so it seals those, and that the paint jobs stay fresh. These, so that way you can fish these lures like intended with those paint jobs for a long period of time. Alright guys, so the next thing we want to talk about is hook bonnets. We want to talk about these little things right here. We're not sure, you probably saw them in the video, you were wondering what are those for. Well, they're to guard those hooks. Sometimes I like to put these Kastmasters in my pocket, a bunch of different colors, a bunch of different sizes. I like to just throw a bunch of different baits in there in general, whether I'm trout fishing, bass fishing, anything. And you just throw them in there with these bonnets on, and they never get tangled up, they never scratch anything, they never hook anything. The bonnets never come off. They're excellent. You get them at Bass Pro Shops. You can get them a few other places now. Tackle Warehouse is carrying them, just recently started to carry those. So everybody's catching on. These things are really important, especially when you're bank fishing and you want to be organized, but you also don't want to have all these things with the tangles and the mess that they cause with hooking everything and ripping up your clothes. So keep that in mind. All right, guys, so one of the last things we're going to go ahead and talk about here is taking a Kastmaster like this and threading on a teaser trailer right there. And all we're doing is using a 3-inch Berkley Power Bait power crawler. Now, mice tails look exactly like the power crawler. They're the same exact thing, except these power crawlers do not float. The ones I use do not float. So it just allows this Kastmaster to sink a bit better when I'm casting it, or even if you're trolling it. So it really adds this, it's definitely much more enticing. It's got an entirely different look, profile, and stuff like that when it has this and it's swinging behind it. And I like to use the more natural colors in clear water reservoirs, and I like to use the more bright colors in some dirtier water reservoirs, some reservoirs that are bodies of water that are not as clean, as clear. So that's when I'll go with those bright colors. And you can also do this with regular night crawlers, live night crawlers. They don't have to be these rubber night crawlers. You can go ahead and do that with some real night crawlers, about 1/4 of an inch, and just thread it the same way on one of those trebles, and that works extremely well. So keep this in mind, guys, the next time you're fishing a Kastmaster. We hope these tips and tricks, these changes and modifications that we've shown you today help you catch more fish. And thanks for watching, East Bay Anglers.